Old stone bunks in orderly rows line the walls of this chamber, and a corroded iron brazier full of old coals stands near the middle of the room. If this isn't the first thing that you think of when I read that, I'm not sure we can be friends. Just kidding, of course we can be friends. Welcome to the Storycraft Society. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Garmin, and over the last couple of weeks here on the channel, we have been making the terrain that you'd need to run Wave Echo Cave from Lost Mine of Phandelver. When I started this channel, my goal was to build all the terrain that I would need to run Lost Mine of Phandelver, and of course we're in our last swing now, and I'm really excited to wrap this thing up with kind of a big bang. Like I said, over the last couple of weeks, the first episode was on cave tiles with walls. The next one was how to organize those cave tiles into the pre-existing rooms of the map. Last week's video was rubble piles. I really enjoyed that video because I hadn't made rubble piles yet, and they're really fun and easy to make. So those were great, but this week we need to be working on room 6 and 7. Now room 7 is just an old storeroom that is a place where the players can rest and relax safely before moving deeper into the dungeon. Those kinds of rooms are really important, but it's not super important that we build that. We already have the pieces for it though, so I'm gonna go ahead and build that in today's episode. But room 6 is a random encounter that the players will be fighting some ghouls in an old bunkhouse. The cool thing about this is that as soon as I read the description text for this room, my mind immediately went to Skyrim. It went to the Dwemer ruins where they have these old Dwemer beds. I think that's just one of those things that sticks out to me when I hear old stone bunks in orderly rows. That's where my mind will go forever. So naturally, I made my mind up that that is going to be the thing that I'm going to be crafting this week, and then we're going to get the set all put together. With that said, I think it's just time we jump in and start crafting these pieces. And then of course, when we get that finished, then we'll talk about building the rooms. Okay, so to get started on these beds, what we're going to do is make 3 separate pieces. Now, of course, piece 2 and piece 3, we need to make 2 of each of those. But the first one is a little box like this, and that's gonna be 1 1/8 inch by 1 3/4 inch by 3/8 tall. Once we have that done, then we're going to make piece 2. We need to make 2 of these, but they are going to be 1 3/16 by 1 13/16 by 1/8 tall. And then lastly, we're gonna make these little guys here, which are 3/16 by 3/4 inch by 3/8 inch. The thickness on these is the 3/16. And the way that that's going to work is that this piece will set on this piece, and that piece will go on top like that. And then these will be decoratory pieces that go on either end. So once we have that, then the next play is going to start shaping these pieces up. So the first thing that we're gonna have to do is we're going to take and make these edges kind of slant like this. I'm gonna go ahead and do this piece and these pieces, and then I'll show you what I mean. It certainly might not look like much here on the camera, but I went ahead and I cut the angles like this on all sides. Now, I think what the important part here is that subtle is better than drastic. I think drastic is gonna end up making it look too overdone, where this is just like the subtle little bit that will make it look nice and finished. Now, I also took piece 3, and I think you can see this one a little better, but I cut it like this on one of the flat faces. So with that done, the next move that we have to do is go in and start sanding down all of these edges. Now, the reason that I want to sand them and not just use the side of a pencil to break all the edges down is because in the reference photo that we have of the Dwemer beds, they're rounded in a lot more places. I would actually argue that when I go to do mine, I'm not gonna round these corners off enough, but I kind of like the little bit of square aspect to it with the doors and their like rigidness, that sort of thing. What we're gonna do is pull out a file and file off all of the pointed edges, and I guess it's time lapse. Let's go. So So now that we have all of the edges of these pieces sanded, it's time to move on to texturing them. I'm going to be using tinfoil balls to do that. And actually, I figured this was a good time to kind of go over my tinfoil ball strategy, I guess you could say. The more and more you use a tinfoil ball, the more it loses its definition. So what I like to do is I actually like to keep two in rotation, one that is a little bit newer and one that is a little bit older. That way I get two different textures. This one is certainly harder to use because it's not perfectly round yet. It's hard to roll, but you can get a lot of different variation from this. Whereas this one is a lot more round, so therefore it's easier to roll it onto things, but you get a lot more smooth texture. All we're going to do is grab one of our tinfoil balls and we are just going to start going to town all over the edges of these pieces. If you're making a big, huge batch of these, you can save yourself a lot of time by not over texturing when you don't have to. Anyway, you get the idea. I'm going to finish knocking these out and then I will come back with the next step. Okay. So the next two pieces to putting our Dwemer beds together, we're going to go with one that's a little more simple and one that's a little more complicated. So the simple one is we just are going to pull out our hot glue gun and we are going to start gluing pieces 1 and 2 together. This is really simple. Just put a little bit of hot glue onto the top of piece 1 and put one of the piece 2s on top. Make sure that you center it up. Then move on and do the same thing to the bottom of piece 1. And then you're gonna have a nice little ice cream sandwich here. And that is awesome. So that's the start to our bed. The next thing that we need to do is a more complicated step. What we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be taking the pieces from 3 and we're gonna be attaching those to the end. Now, on the Dwemer beds, they have these kind of vertical, I don't wanna say pillars, but they're like vertical accents on the top and bottom. So I wanted to have something like that on mine. The way that we do it is by placing it up on the end and centering it up so that it looks nice. Then I just took my X-Acto and just went in and marked on either side of it where I'd need to cut. So then it's simple. It's just going in and cutting through both of the piece 2 pieces until you get down to the piece 1 piece, then notch that out. I like to actually take a little sander and go in and go back and forth just to make sure it's nice and smooth. And once I've got that done, then I pull out my hot glue again and glue the piece 3 in to place. The tighter that joint is, the better the upper joint will look, but honestly, once you get Mod Podge and paint and stuff on this, it will look awesome. With that done, it's time to move on to getting all of the cool design work done. I chose to go with a really simple play here. In my example from Skyrim, there is that one little kind of horizontal line on piece 3. There is a line that runs around the top of my reference example, and I couldn't come up with a really great way that I loved how to do this, but the thing that I did do that I liked was I took a pencil and then traced a line around on the top, but that really from at least a distance made those feel similar, at least in my mind. But with that said, really that's all that you have to do to make these beds functional, right? To put out onto your game table. Now, of course, the sky is the limit with how much decoration you can put on these things. You could put infinitely more carving onto them if you wanted to make them more ornate. You could put symbols on the flat surfaces. I actually did a couple where I did paper towel blankets and pillows so that I had just a couple of different variations in my set here. I didn't want all of them to be exactly the same. You could even do ruined ones if you wanted, where you'd build one up and then break it into pieces and then maybe fix it to a base or something. There's literally a million things that you can do with these, and that's what I like about little tiny projects like this. With that done, it is time to move on to the painting step. So the first thing that I'm going to do is whip up a batch of Black Magic Craft base coat, which is just 50/50 matte Mod Podge and black acrylic craft paint, and I'm going to get these all base coated up, and then we will move on to paint. Now when it comes to painting these, I just use my regular stone painting plan. I used a charcoal gray to a pewter gray to a light gray. And then for my blankets, I did a chocolate brown with a Agrax Earthshade dark brown wash over top of them. And that was it. Not a complicated painting situation, but then I ended up with these gorgeous, gorgeous pieces that are ready to be built into a board. So let's go into time lapse because that's what's gonna happen next. And then we're going to start looking at these rooms once they're all put together. So here we are with another project that I am so stoked with the build on. Can't say enough positive things about this, and I've got some cool dormer beds out of it. I've used a bunch of different things in this build, so if it's something that you're interested in, you can definitely check it out back on the channel. We've got the cave tiles, that's from the Redbrand Hideout series. We've got the doors from the Redbrand Hideout series, the dungeon tiles from the Redbrand Hideout series. We've got the Tavern Keeper's Tap over here. That's from a Quick Craft episode a little while ago. And then we've of course got our rubble tiles from last week. I think in a long project of building all the terrain for this pretty big dungeon, I am excited to just keep pumping set after set after set out, because that's what it's all about. Being a crafting DM is just all about keep making cool stuff. Did I get these dormer beds perfect? No. Did they look exactly like the ones from Skyrim? Absolutely not, they don't. But the good news is, who cares? They look great on my table. I'll get the warm and fuzzies every time I place them out, and that's really what matters when it comes to making cool sets for your players, and they are never gonna look at these beds and go, Garmin, you didn't make a Dwemer bed right. They'll just be stoked that the description that I give them matches the terrain that's on the table, and that's the root of all this. So, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Share this with a friend. That goes a long way to helping a small YouTube channel out. And honestly, other than that, just thank you so much for watching. With that said, I've got nothing else to say. So until next week, I'll be seeing you.